Hi everybody, I'm back. If you watched my previous video, you may know I was sick. I'm feeling better and I thought that I would get on here and see what happens, what we talk about. My intentions are to go through my book though and go over my twin flame journey from the beginning to the end. So I want to speak on this and communicate. I know it's really for no one, for no reason. But it's my greatest love story and my greatest adventure, and I absolutely love and cherish this, and I cherish this story and where I'm at now. So I was on this twin flame journey without knowing it. So I also wanted to communicate this in case anybody else finds themselves in something similar and can maybe follow this, because when I came across what was happening with me, I basically had to Google things that were happening, and from there I came across some articles that talked about the twin flame journey, and what I found was it was exactly on point with what was happening with me. And the twin flame journey, if you know anything about it, it does follow stages and progressions to that relationship, to where it ultimately ends up in self-realization, or realizing that there is no self. And so that is what happened here with me, and I want to share that journey with you. So with me, everything happened pretty quickly, and I feel kind of like I was given a fast pass, or I kind of cheated my way. But of course there is no me, and I didn't do anything. This is just what happened. So it's just another happening. And so I'd like to introduce my book. It's called Love, Death, Nothing. And it's the love story that never really was, by Nydia Ileana, which is myself. It's a fairly short book. It's 36 pages. And, it was a short journey. The times that we were together were not that long. Everything happened within maybe 6 months, and then there was a period of separation, and then in my journey he died, and that's where a lot of the more spiritual work kind of came in. And I wasn't a spiritual person before, so this was all new to me. But what I found was they call it the dark night of the soul. And so I went through all of that and the suffering and everything of that, and then there was the realization, or the shift of the unknowing or knowing that happens when you realize that there is no self, there is no one. So when that realization came, I'm getting a notification here. Okay, whenever that realization came, I was very, very confused. So I had to look up these different symptoms, as if you would call them that, and things like that, and see what Google had to say. And that's when I came across this information, and it was exactly in line with my story. So my story is just literally what happened. So in my book you will find the story from the beginning to the end. So to introduce everything, the book starts off with a preface and an introduction, and that's mostly just going over some of the things that are my background. And so I think I may have shared that I didn't know anything about spirituality in the sense of like dark night of the soul, twin flames, non-duality, enlightenment, none of those things. I mean, I've heard the word enlightenment and things like that, but I did not know what that, how you get there, what that was, what that felt like. So anyhow, I was raised a Southern Baptist, and I grew up in a typical home. My mom and dad and my brother. I have a younger brother. And for the first part of my life, we did go to church, and we were just, your normal Christian family. Then later in my life, we didn't go to church so much. We did like Bible studies and things at my house with my parents. And then once I became around 18, I, went on my own, and I had a few struggles and things, and I remember being drawn back to going to church. So I started going to church on my own as an adult. and I was baptized, and I was, saved and everything at that point, where I would really consider that, my decision. As a child, it was just mostly my family taking me to church and things like that. Although I loved God and I believed in God and all these things, I consider when I was 18 to be my real choice to follow Jesus. So at that point, that's what happened. And I lived my life like that for quite a while. I got married, had a daughter, all the normal things that a person would do. I was pretty much just your average normal person. In a sense of, if you see from the outside. Now, I'm going to share some things with you that may sound a little bit different. So I was a Christian, but some kind of unusual things, I think, maybe for a Christian happened with me previous to the twin flame journey or anything like that. So growing up, I always felt quite different than my family. My family was, my mom's side was very loud, loving, hugs, kisses, lots of expressions of love, things like that. Lots of parties, just, lots of commotion, lots of cousins. There was just a lot of people in that family, but that's also how they were as far as personality. And I was just not like that. I was always the child that was, most people considered shy. I was more of a loner. I liked to observe, and I had really no desires to play with other children. Although if I did play, I did enjoy it. I didn't really seek that out. I was actually pretty content with just sitting on the sidelines. And, I remember my teachers and my mom telling me that, teachers had to help get me involved with playing with the children or doing certain activities because I would just kind of sit back and observe. But that was really just how I was, because even later in life, that's how I can really enjoy being at a party or an event or something for a certain amount of time. Just while sitting and observing. I mean, I've been at weddings where people are dancing and having fun, and I can just sit there and watch and really enjoy that way. Whereas if somebody were to pressure me to go do something, at that time it wasn't something that really brought me a whole lot of joy. I preferred more to observe and think. So, so I lived very much inside myself, in a sense, but there was a lot of anxiety and a lot of chaos even within myself. So I did suffer from anxiety, and I think I had that even early as a child. But my anxiety, if we talk about it as a story, can be traced kind of back to my childhood was a little bit unpredictable and chaotic with some of the choices and behaviors that my parents exhibited. So that made me feel a little bit unsafe, and that's, I think, where the anxiety came from. So, and that's all within the story, but it's important to speak on these things so that you get a sense of the whole picture. So that's how I grew up. Now, I had a grandmother that I was very close to, and this was very early on. I think I must have been 3 years old. And so my grandmother was very close to me, and one time they were going to come visit us, and at that time we lived somewhere in Mexico, and my grandparents had a car accident, and both my grandparents died at the scene of that car accident, and that was just very traumatic for me, to have that first experience of somebody dying be my grandparents, and I was, expecting them. I was very young. I was very close to my grandmother, so it was a big shock to me. And I may have not noticed it at that point, but I can remember as a teenager and as an adult always feeling like there was a presence around me. And I always attributed that presence as my grandmother. So that maybe she was watching over me or being with me to lend support or help or be someone I can talk to if I was having a hard time. So there was times that I was having a hard time and I felt that presence, and I would talk to her. She would not talk back, but I could feel, and I had a sense of a presence there, and that presence remained until my first daughter was maybe about 2 years old. And at that point, I had moved into a house. We had moved out of state for my husband's job at that time, and I had left my family and things like that. And I was in this house, and I think I was having a bit of a hard time, and I went upstairs, and I was going to take a bath, and I felt the presence of my grandmother, and I talked to her and things like that. And at that time, I also felt another presence of an angel, and this angel actually appeared to me and was talking to me, and it brought me a bit of confusion because I didn't know if I had always mislabeled or misunderstood the presence that was with me. So I thought maybe this was actually not my grandmother, this was an angel, and I could tell it was not my grandmother. Anyhow, the angel brought me a lot of peace. It quickly left, and I was very curious about that whole situation as well. Well, strange things kept happening. For example, in that house, my daughter's room had like what they call a play stand. It's not a very popular toy, but it's basically a large wooden arch, and the kids can play inside and, you know, put like silk or like make forts by putting blankets and sheets and stuff over the top. So that was just the center part, or like the focal point of my daughter's room as you walked by the door. And one morning, pretty soon after we had moved in, I was walking past that area, and I saw this black figure of a little girl, and I thought if that was my daughter. So I looked for a while. I was very confused because I knew she had gone, you know, that I had taken her to school. But I sat there and I watched, and I couldn't make out what it was. The figure never left. It stayed there pretty much like it was turned its back to me. I did not see its face. And then I got a sense of fear and I walked away. Now, we had just recently moved to a new state. This was a new house that we were excited about, and my daughter had just started school. Everything was starting to settle down. And then that appearance occurred. And I was a little bit fearful, but I also got the sense that this wasn't something that would hurt my daughter. But I needed to find out more information. And maybe not the right thing to do, but I didn't tell my husband at first because I didn't want our family to freak out and get scared. I kind of just wanted to handle this on my own. So I looked up online, like I do with everything else, what this was, a black figure in a child's room. So it ended up being that it could be a ghost, and that you can communicate with ghosts and see what they need and ask them to go away. So that was what I started to do. I went and I purchased like a little, I don't know what they're called now, pendulum. And it's basically like a little rock or something on a string that you can hold, and you can let it know that if the pendulum, the little rock or whatever's at the end, moves back and forth, then that's a yes. If it moves in circles, it's a no. So I mean, or the other way around. I don't remember exactly, but it really doesn't matter. Whatever you communicate to it, it'll understand, and then that'll answer your questions. So I used that to communicate with this little girl, and eventually she actually did leave. It was not immediate. It was not the first time of having to use that pendulum. It was not the first time that I had seen her before she left. This went on maybe for 3 months. And at some point I did tell my husband, and that was kind of the end of it all. So anyway, the little girl was not harmful. It was just wanting to play, wanting to be there. So these weird things started to happen. I mean, that's not a typical thing that happens to people. It's seen in movies and things, but I mean, that's not typical. But what I will tell you is, like with the pendulum and all these things that happen, everything was real. I mean, the pendulum did swing back and forth. We were having conversations, or it was doing circles, depending on what the question or what was going on. So all of these things, either the angel, the feeling of my grandmother, all of these things happen in this apparent reality. So when you hear of people talking about ghosts or mediums or any of these things, you know, they actually are real in this reality, that apparently we are living in this separate reality. Nothing is really actually happening, but it's appearing this way. Um, you know, there's actually no time, and there's just so much more to discuss, but that is real complicated right now at this point. It's just to just let you know that all of these appearances can and may happen in this reality. So, as Christians, many times we didn't talk about or didn't believe in certain entities, for example, aliens, and things like that. So, and even ghosts are pretty rare and not something that's really talked about. So, I know my family didn't believe in any of this stuff. So, but because of direct experience, there's just no denying it. I mean, when you are actually there and you're experiencing this and having to deal with this, it's pretty clear it's real. So it is real in this reality. Anything that can be imagined, dreamed, anything that's ever been talked about, as crazy as it may seem. I mean, I've heard things like reptilian, or, you know, these crazy, crazy things that we hear about. They actually do happen in this reality. They're not real in the sense at the end of the story. Like, I mean, if we were to be able to zoom out and actually see what's happening, or get the realization of what was really happening, we would know that these entities and all this stuff, even this body, this person, Nydia, is actually nothing. Just like an alien is nothing. I'm actually nothing. Okay, so there is no me. There really is no me at all. And so, when you understand this, you can look back, and that's what I did, is look back, and I was like, wow, all of those things were real. All of those things were happening and not happening, and people don't sometimes understand or get very confused when these things happen to them or a family member. They actually do occur. So there's like quotes that say, you know, if you can dream it, it can be a reality, or something like that. Well, there's a lot of truth to that, because what is speaking to you here in this communication is an infinite divine energy or being. It's an unknowing. I can't tell you what it is, but I do know it is an infinite being, and it's arising. It's what's happening. It's literally this. There's nothing separate from it. There's nothing separate from, like, actually, I'm not separate from this phone or from that picture frame. Everything's actually together. It's just we are perceiving a separation. Okay, so with that whole thing, that was all seen. That, you know, that was all false. But I just want to tell you that if you know someone, or these things happen in real life, not in real life, but in the real sense of what we're feeling here, this separation, this contracted energy, whatever people want to call it, in this sense where we feel separate, there can be an alien that appears here, and that alien will feel separate from me. So I will feel like that alien is something else, and I could get scared, I could anything. So these appearances do happen, and because this is an infinite energy of creation, anything can appear. Infinity means everything. So if you're able to imagine it or dream it, or somebody said something about it, it is a reality in this reality, because there's infinity. In infinity, there is nothing that is excluded. It is everything. So these things do happen, but I did also learn something in this reality, is if you don't put attention to some of these things, they go away. So at one point, I just was fed up with the whole thing. I just didn't want anything, and this was before the little girl went away, and I think this is what helped everything go away. I took my little box that had like the pendulums and some of the things that I used to communicate with this ghost. I took everything, including a random Buddha statue I had, because I felt like that was an idol. I took anything that I thought was ungodly, and I threw it out in the trash can, and I said, I don't want this stuff ever in my house again. Well, after that, things really did settle down. So when you make the choice, or you say, I don't want this anymore, or, something like that happens with the character, a lot of times those entities or situations will just go away. Now, that's not always the case, because, as you know, we've heard like about hauntings in homes and things like that, where people can't get rid of this stuff. So that also occurs. So if you've heard, okay, yes, you can just get rid of it, and no, you can't get rid of it. Actually, both of those are true in this reality. I mean, it's an infinite amount of possibilities that can happen. So there's no telling. But this is what happened here. And so that all happened. So I had these moments of my reality, being questioned, and just things happening that I had to wrap my mind around, or that I had to somehow understand and deal with the changes of, okay, this is actually real. I've been taught my whole life this is not. So my mind was starting to open a little bit, I think. And I think that kind of helped with everything that later happened. So I had those experiences. I kind of threw out everything. And at that point, I really just stayed pretty much like a normal family for a while, till I had a health issue. I went to go get a checkup, and I had extremely high blood pressure. And they had to rush me to the hospital. They said it was too bad. I could not leave. They had to rush me to the hospital. So they rushed me to the hospital, did a bunch of tests on me, all kinds of stuff. Eventually my husband came, and I could go home with some medicine, and I was to record and track everything that was happening with me. Well, nothing really changed with the medicine. My blood pressure remained high for weeks. I went back. I had ultrasounds. I had just a bunch of medical tests, and they did not find anything that was abnormal. They kind of just ruled it to be genetic. But the problem was, my blood pressure wasn't being able to be controlled with the medicine. So even with the medicine, it was still very high. So one night I was in my bedroom, and I began to feel pretty bad, and I took my blood pressure, and it was very, very high, like stroke level, but I was not sure that I wanted to go to the hospital just that yet. So I asked my husband to let me go lay down, and then we would decide what we would do. So I went and go lay down, and I started to feel worse. I started to feel dizzy. I started to get nervous. And suddenly I felt like I was dying. I don't know if I was having a panic attack or if I was actually dying. But what happened next was real interesting. And my phone is about to die, which is kind of unfortunate, because I was just about to get to that story. Well, because my phone is about to die, I'll make a second video and start off with what happened when I went to my room after that health issue. So I want to thank you for watching, and we will continue on with this story time in the next video. If you're new, please subscribe, and if you want to know when I put out new videos, you can click on the notification bell. This is a new channel, so I hope you subscribe, and I can start to build some people that I can communicate with, because this is kind of like my fun now, and I really enjoy communicating these things that I love, and thinking back on these wonderful experiences that didn't really happen, but apparently happened. And that just makes it, I mean, you think that when there's no one, that nothing is special anymore, but everything is so much more special. And just like thinking back on these stories and things are just amazing that this stuff happens. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and come back.